Billionaire discovers a surprising friendship, son's heartwarming bond with the cleaner, revealed. Robert Hayes, a ruthless titan in the world of finance, stood on the balcony of his sprawling New Jersey mansion, surveying his empire. The manicured lawns glistened under the morning sun, and the grandeur of the estate screamed success. Yet even amidst the pristine beauty and luxuries he accumulated, an unsettling void ate at him. His son Max, a brilliant 10-year-old, lingered in the shadows, out of reach despite being so close. Robert's heartless ambition had forged a world where wealth eclipsed warmth, leaving his son isolated, with only the weight of expectations pressing heavily against his tiny, fragile shoulders. It was Tuesday. Clouds draped the sky, hinting at a storm, both outside and within Robert's heart. The library, a fortress of leather-bound books and polished shelves, felt colder today. Max had been holed up in there for hours. When Robert finally found him, he noticed the boy's gaze drift, his mind racing through uncharted galaxies rather than the cold realities of corporate success. The boy's excitement for science and exploration was met with Robert's dismissal, the persistent mantra echoing in his mind: reputation over dreams. Before he could return to his thoughts, the unthinkable happened. Maria, a single mother who worked as the cleaner, stepped into the library. Her presence was warm, alive, so different from the meticulously curated friendships Robert cultivated, wrapped in finance and elitism. When she began to engage Max in simple conversations about the stars, the child inched closer, drawn to her authenticity. Robert felt a crack in his world. Who was this woman to spark joy in his son? Why was his boy more comfortable with her than with him? It ignited a flicker of rage within Robert that he could hardly contain. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously. It makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, as he tried to grasp the threads of control, the internal conflict waged within. Max and Maria's bond deepened, pulling his son into the intriguing world of bubbling beakers and scientific mysteries, while Robert pushed him toward dinner parties and charity events. The fear crept closer. What if Maria was all Max needed to thrive? What if this unremarkable cleaner overshadowed Robert's legacy? He wavered, considering what it meant for his son to find joy outside their high society cage, but couldn't shake the suffocating pressure to maintain their status. Days turned into agonizing weeks. Max spent secret hours in the lab, following Maria's guidance on a science project that attracted the attention of an esteemed university. But just then, the dam holding back Robert's fury broke. He whisked Max away on a corporate retreat that would overshadow the child's breakthrough. He wouldn't let the likes of Maria tarnish his son's future. In the rising storm, Max's heart raced with desperation. He could feel the weight of loyalty gnawing at him, the thread that connected him to his father tangled with a blossoming respect for Maria. In a moment of clarity, Max summoned an uncharacteristic bravery, preparing to confront Robert. He realized that he no longer wanted to be a pawn, living under the harsh spotlight of success defined by social status. And as he steeled himself for this battle, he could sense the air thickening with a palpable tension. Would his father see the value of genuine connection, or would he cling to his prejudices, leaving Max to navigate this new emotional landscape alone? Max stood at the doorway of his room, still trembling from the confrontation he felt had been building for weeks. The corporate retreat loomed in his mind, but the shadow of Maria's encouragement remained bright. It was as if her words had woven themselves into his spirit, igniting something within him, a desire to break free from the confines of his father's relentless grip. He replayed the moment when he had resolved to stand up to Robert. The image of his father's cold demeanor haunted him. Robert was a man who measured success in dollar signs, not warm smiles or shared laughs. As silence enveloped the mansion, Max found himself yearning for the vibrancy Maria brought into his world. He wanted to chase the stars again, to study the mysteries of the universe instead of hiding beneath the heavy cloak of expectation that suffocated him. That night, as Max lay staring at the ceiling, he thought about the lab filled with bubbling beakers and notes scattered across a wooden table. Maria's enthusiasm had been intoxicating. It was infectious, sparking neural connections in his brain that had laid dormant for so long. What she saw in him wasn't just potential, it was a depth that Robert refused to explore, one that existed beyond wealth and status. His heart clenched with determination. Meanwhile, in the depths of his office, Robert churned through spreadsheets, an endless stream of numbers that suffocated him. He should have savored the thrill of success, yet a gnawing ache full of insecurity clawed at his core. The realization of losing Max to Maria, to genuine emotion, stirred something primal within him. Anger and fear intertwined with desperation. Would he really let a cleaner unravel the dynasty he had built? Every analytical part of his mind screamed to maintain dominance, yet a darker worry lurked just behind. What if Max had already chosen? The next day, Max approached Robert not with fear, but with a fragile bravery. His heart thumped audibly as he sought out his father, bracing for the storm ahead. "Dad," he began, voice steady despite its youth, "I want to talk about the retreat." Robert, eyes narrowed, gestured for Max to continue. A moment passed like an eternity, an invisible wall thickening in the air between the two. "I want to meet Maria again. I want to learn about science, about the stars." The words hung between them, heavy with implications. Each syllable felt like pulling a thread in the well-ordered tapestry of Robert's life. Silence fell, but beneath it surged a torrent of thought in Robert's mind. An overwhelming urge to squash this burgeoning connection threatened to engulf him. Yet hidden beneath that tide was another emotion, a flicker of pride, a recognition of the son he had inadvertently stifled. "There's more to life than what you see in this house," Max pressed, desperation imbued in his tone. "I can't keep pretending." For the first time, Robert faced a reflection of his own fears in his son's eyes. He wondered if he was truly ready to confront the truth of his own upbringing, his relentless ambition. Inside him, a choice began to crystallize. The decision between holding tight to the life he had built and allowing his son the freedom to chart his own course. Time seemed to stretch, and with each heartbeat the room pulsed with potential change. Max could feel the shifting tide, the growing tension as Robert processed the weight of his choices. Would Robert embrace a connection that could redefine their relationship, or would the fear of failure overrule the emerging understanding of love and acceptance? As the storm outside began to brew, rattling the windows, so too did an internal storm rise within Robert, setting the stage for an impending confrontation that would change everything. Would he relent and choose connection over power, or would he let another opportunity slip further away? The moment had arrived, and with the shadows deepening around him, Max realized he was on the cusp of not just a confrontation, but a transformation for both father and son. Would they step out of the storm and into the light, or would the thunder of unresolved conflicts drown out their desperate call for connection? Max took a step back, his words hanging in the tense air like lightning in a storm. He sensed Robert's hesitation, the internal battle warring within his father's composed exterior. For a flicker of a moment, he hoped for a crack in Robert's steely facade. But as always, Max was confronted with the reality of his father's resolve. "Maria is not part of this world, Max," Robert finally said, his voice firm but lined with an unmistakable tremor. "You need to focus on your future, on what matters." The entrapment of expectation tightened around Max like a chokehold. "What matters to you is not the same as what matters to me," he said, the fierceness growing in his tone. "I need to understand science, to feel the curiosity that she sparked. You can't box me in like this." Robert's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. "Curiosity will not pay the bills, nor will it build your legacy. You cannot waste your time on fantasies." The words stabbed at Max, but something inside him ignited. "Then maybe that's exactly what I need," he retorted, feeling the stirrings of defiance course through him. "To break free from what you consider a legacy." Max turned to leave, his heart pounding in his chest, knowing fully well that he had initiated a shift in their dynamic. Confrontation had always seemed daunting, but that moment felt more liberating than he could have anticipated. As he stepped out into the corridor, he mulled over the implications of defiance. Stepping away from Robert's shadow might mean redefining his identity. Over the next few days, Max submerged himself in his burgeoning interest in astronomy. Every moment spent at the lab allowed him to breathe deeper, to explore realms of knowledge that had once seemed unreachable. Maria had become not just a figure of inspiration, but a mentor, facilitating a doorway to understanding he had always craved. As he observed the stars, calculations began to form in his mind, transforming the cosmos into a language he yearned to decipher. He found himself grappling with questions, not just about the universe, but about his own relationship with Robert. Could they bridge the chasm that had widened like a black hole between them? Could he upset the carefully constructed hierarchy of power? Doubts nagged at him like relentless stars in the night sky, unwavering and persistent. The storm clouds of confrontation still brewed during family dinners, the weight of unspoken words suffocating every attempt at normalcy. Yet, as Max began to build confidence, he resolved to approach Robert again. He wanted not just to plead for understanding, but to elucidate the emotional cost of their rift. The next dinner, Max prepared. Resolved to peel away the layers of tension, he adopted a calculated approach. "Dad," he ventured reluctantly, "I want to invite Maria over tomorrow." A knife-throwing stillness followed his announcement. Robert froze mid-bite, his eyes riveted on Max, with a calculated gaze that felt like an electrical current zapping through the air. "Is this truly what you want?" Robert asked, masking incredulity with feigned concern. Max's insides quaked, but he pushed forward. "Yes, I need you to meet her to see why she means so much to me. I want you to understand." Robert's face morphed into a mixture of frustration and intrigue as he slid back into thought. "You think I'll simply accept this?" "Why not? This isn't just a fleeting whim for me," Max shot back, emboldened. "This is about my life, about who I want to become." Frustration pulsed at Robert's temples as he realized the urgency within his son's voice, a surge of unfamiliar emotions bubbling in him. Max felt a shaky mixture of hope and dread. Every moment before the inevitable answer felt like standing on a precipice. Would Robert descend further into anger or recognize the significance of this ask? But as it dawned upon him that something was changing, a new understanding crept in. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Maria or the stars. It was about unearthing emotions buried under years of pride and expectations for both of them. Ultimately, the choice before Robert loomed large, but instinctively Max also knew this invitation could either mark the beginning of their healing or further entrench them in disagreement. The silence became deafening as uncertainty clawed at each heartbeat. What would Robert choose? The stars, or the chains that bound them both? The silence stretched on, each second feeling like a countdown before an explosion. Max's heart raced, the fear of rejection entwining itself with a flicker of hope. The uncertainty of Robert's next words was worse than anything he could have imagined. Finally, Robert broke the stillness. "Tomorrow," he said, his tone remarkably neutral, devoid of fervor or anger. "If you want this, I won't deny you." The weight of his response settled heavily in the room. Neither a victory nor a defeat. Was this merely compliance or a subtle recognition of something that had shifted? Max's breath hitched in disbelief. Really? You're okay with that? He needed to be sure, to dissect the layers of doubt veiling that single affirmative word. "Don't expect me to embrace her," Robert replied sharply, though the edge of his voice softened slightly. "But if it matters to you, we'll meet her." A rush of adrenaline surged through Max, but he had no time to revel in it. The very thing he had desired was now thrust into his reality. It was a moment he had to navigate carefully, like the intricate patterns of constellations above. Commitment lurked dangerously close to the surface, and he knew he would have to wield it with precision. As the sun dipped below the horizon the next evening, a storm brewed within Max. Maria's arrival ignited a whirlpool of emotions. Excitement surged alongside apprehension. He had prepared her to face Robert, but the unpredictability of his father remained a looming shadow. "Are you ready for this?" Maria asked, as they sat in the living room waiting for Robert's arrival. He could see her unease, the remnants of their shared vulnerability hovering in the air between them. "I guess we'll find out," Max responded, forcing a smile, though inside he was a tangled mess of anxiety and determination. They were standing at a crossroads where past choices collided with the prospect of new beginnings. Then there was the knock at the door. An unmistakable ripple of tension surged through the room. This was a pivotal moment, a chance to redefine not just his relationship with Robert, but the very fabric of who he was. When the door swung open, Max's heart sank for a fraction of a second. Robert appeared, dressed sharply, eyes scanning the unfamiliar room before settling on Maria. He was the embodiment of authority and control, but underneath the well-practiced veneer lay an anxiety that reflected Max's own. "Maria," Robert started, voice steady, but there was a glimmer of something more. Curiosity, disapproval. Max couldn't tell. "Mr. Collins, it's a pleasure to meet you," Maria replied, her confidence radiating as she extended a hand. Max watched intently, eager for Robert's reaction. Would he accept this small but significant gesture? Or would he retreat into his armor of elitism? "Likewise," Robert acknowledged, his handshake firm but not domineering. The interaction felt strikingly normal, yet it was anything but. Max observed the moment unfold, half hoping that perhaps common ground could begin to bridge the unyielding chasm of misunderstanding between them. As they settled onto the couch, small talk ebbed and flowed like the stars outside, but Max sensed an undercurrent of tension. Each topic skirted the hovering issues of ambition, dreams, and the ever-present spectre of legacy. Soon enough, the facade began to crack. "So, Maria, what is it that you do?" Robert's tone tinged with skepticism, but there was an edge of genuine inquiry. "I work in the lab down the road," she responded, "focusing on astronomy. I've been researching the effects of dark matter." No sooner had the words left her mouth than Max felt the shift. Robert's eyebrow arched slightly in surprise. The conversation pivoted unexpectedly, exposing layers of knowledge, shared passion, and slowly unveiling the connections that Max hoped would stitch their relationships together. With every fact, every detail that Maria shared about her work, the delicate threads of acknowledgement began to weave a tapestry of possibility. But as Max listened, he couldn't shake the looming question that darted in his mind. Would Robert find value in Maria's aspirations, or would he cling to the conventional paths he had charted for his son? As the evening continued, tensions rippled beneath the surface, and it became evident that this encounter was merely the first step toward a reckoning. The air thickened again, no longer just charged with uncertainty, but with an undeniable energy. Something had been set in motion. Max felt the world shift around him, and he knew the journey was only beginning. He was on the brink of transformation, where understanding could flourish or falter. What would come next could redefine everything. But first, he needed to confront the question that had begun to gnaw at him. Was he prepared for the emotional fallout that would arise if Robert rejected the core of who Maria was? The realization echoed ominously in his mind, thrusting him into yet another dilemma he hadn't anticipated, but now had to face head-on. Max's thoughts spiraled as the conversation began to ease into a comfortable cadence. He watched Maria articulate her passion for astronomy, her eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. It was the singular moment Max had envisioned. However, the stakes felt higher now than ever. With each detail she revealed, he waited for Robert's expression to falter, to reveal doubt that could easily shatter everything. "Dark matter," Robert repeated, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity in his voice. "What made you choose such a niche subject?" Maria hesitated. "I've always been fascinated by the universe," she replied, her brow furrowing slightly as if weighing the significance of her words. "Understanding dark matter is crucial for comprehending how galaxies form and evolve. It might seem abstract, but it's the foundation of everything." Max felt a swell of admiration for her resolve, a stark contrast to Robert's clinical approach. He wondered if Robert would see the potential in Maria's work, or dismiss it as fanciful ambition. "I see," Robert responded, his tone still guarded. "You're driven, which is commendable." He paused, as if weighing the import of his next words. "But ambition alone doesn't guarantee success. It's about results." From the corner of his eye, Max noticed the way Maria stiffened. It was a flicker of reaction, quickly suppressed. "Results take time," she countered, her tone steadying. "In science, patience is key. The journey is just as important as the outcome." A surge of pride filled Max, tempered with concern. Would Robert even acknowledge that response, or revert to his familiar patterns of skepticism? As he watched the dynamic unfold, Max felt the invisible threads of his own ambitions, pulled, frayed, and tangled in the growing tension around them. "Perhaps," Robert replied, his tone edging closer to contemplation, "but in the end, you'll need to produce something tangible to justify your efforts." "But isn't that the case with any field?" Maria interjected, her voice rising slightly, not in anger, but with the fervor of conviction. "Every idea starts with a vision, but it takes work and belief to bring it to life." It was a testament to her own journey, one that Max recognized. He saw Robert's posture stiffen, the familiar shield of defense rising back up. Here was the moment, the potential crossroads, where they could either forge a new understanding or retreat to the safe distance of cynicism. Max made a decision, an instinctual leap rather than a calculated maneuver. "Dad," he began, drawing Robert's attention away from Maria, "are you ever going to allow yourself to truly listen, to explore what else is out there beyond your expectations?" A silence ensued that felt like an eternity. Max held his breath, heart pounding. Double-edged swords hovered above him. Standing up for Maria meant challenging Robert, but could also alienate him. Robert's gaze could have set the room ablaze. "I listen, Max, but you need to understand that life isn't just about dreams. It's built on reality." Max felt the familiar heat of frustration rise. "And what if those dreams are also a form of reality? We both know you didn't climb to the top without vision. It's the same principle." The challenge ignited a flicker of something in Robert's expression, perhaps confusion, or even a hint of grudging respect. It was a crack in his armor. "I'm not asking you to compromise your vision," Robert replied, maintaining his cool demeanor, though the tone was strained. "But running after dreams won't pay the bills, and it won't guarantee happiness." "Is that what you think drives me?" Max pressed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Do you truly believe I'm chasing ambition for its own sake? I want to build something meaningful, a life I can be proud of, with people who matter to me." As the silence wrapped around them, Max's heart thrummed in his chest, longing for affirmation, yet he felt the tension shift in a way he had not anticipated. Maria shifted in her seat, her expression brittle, yet curious. "Mr. Collins, is it that you don't see the value in passion, or are you afraid of what it could really mean?" The question hung in the air, pregnant with implications. Robert's brow furrowed slightly, as if he had been struck by an unexpected revelation. Max sensed a crack, a vulnerability beginning to unfurl. "Maybe if you took a chance and embraced something new, you'd see a different outcome," Maria pressed gently, her voice blending kindness with challenge. Max wanted to shout, to insist that this was the moment that could change everything. But the chasm was deep, and Robert's composure had been meticulously built over decades. Yet within that crack there was a glimmer of hope, a chance for understanding. If only Max could keep pushing, amplifying the dialogue bubbling beneath the surface. As they sat there, a silence fell, and he could feel the world holding its breath, waiting for the next words, the next breakthrough, the next moment of truth. What would Robert do? Would he finally consider the aspirations of someone outside his expectations, or would he retreat back to the solace of his own controlled landscapes? Max knew now that he was prepared to fight for Maria, for his beliefs, and for the chance to finally reshape his own path. But would he be able to hold steadfast against the legacy of doubt looming so closely behind? In that charged moment, everything felt poised on the edge of a knife. The next word could either sever ties or open a new depth of connection. The air thickened, an electric anticipation building toward an irrevocable choice. Max's heart raced as he braced himself for Robert's next words. Every tense moment spun on the axis of uncertainty, and Max instinctively clenched his fists, feeling the weight of his father's scrutiny. It was a rare crack in Robert's steadfast facade, yet it frightened Max to think how easily it could close back up. "Passion is one thing, Maria," Robert said slowly, his tone now quieter but still laced with skepticism. "But passion without practicality can lead to dead ends. Can you name a single breakthrough in your field that didn't start as a measurable hypothesis or hard data?" Max could sense the tension coiling tighter as Robert systematically dissected Maria's convictions. Max opened his mouth to respond, but before he could bind his words to the air, Maria's voice rose, sure and unwavering. "I can't claim to have all the answers," she replied, her confidence spilling over. "But isn't exploration the cornerstone of science? So many great discoveries arose from questions no one thought to ask. Sometimes you have to take the leap to find out what's possible." Her passion was infectious, igniting a spark within Max. He admired her tenacity, her refusal to let Robert's cold logic extinguish the warmth of her dreams. And yet Robert's skepticism hung heavily in the air. The weight of it threatened not just Maria's aspirations, but Max's own beliefs as well. "How do you think astrophysics is funded?" Robert challenged, leaning closer and crossing his arms. "By proving tangible results, proving that the lofty dreams can lead to something real. A passion project might feel fulfilling, but it doesn't guarantee you a career or stability." Max felt his stomach churn, not just at Robert's words, but at the realization of his mounting frustration. This wasn't merely about Maria. It ran deeper into the core of what he believed about ambition and success. "Maybe that's just it, Dad," Max said, finding his voice, the urgency rising within him. "You see results as the only measure of success. But what if success also means challenging the status quo? What if it's about the process, the collaboration, the journeys we take together? You taught me that every great advancement came from risk and imagination." "Life isn't just about dreams, son," Robert returned, the steel in his voice returning. "It's about making decisions based on reality." Reality. Max felt a flood of anger spill over at this notion. It was ironic. Robert lived in a world steeped in ambition, yet consistently reduced it to numbers and cold calculations. Max had spent years trying to not only live up to that standard, but to bend it. What if integrity and ambition could coexist? Maria's soft gaze drew him back, and he remembered why he had engaged Robert in the first place. "It is possible," he said, determined, "to dream and still hold on to reality. It's a lot easier when someone believes in you." He glanced at Robert, his heart racing once more, desperate for recognition, for hope. Robert's expression shifted momentarily, a shadow of something deeper flickering in his eyes. Maybe it was doubt, fear, or the reflection of what he once was. Max dared to hold the unyielding gaze, searching for an acknowledgement of that flicker. "If you both believe in these ideas, despite the odds, then what are the next steps?" Robert asked, his voice now almost a challenge. Max's pulse quickened. The question lingered in the air, rippling with possibility. The conversation had pivoted. It was no longer an interrogation. It felt like an invitation, a chance to fashion a bridge toward the new beginnings they all sought. Maria opened her mouth, clearly ready to explain her next project, but before the words could take shape, Max interjected, an idea sparking in his mind. "What if we made it a collaborative venture? Maria can present her findings, but I can help set the groundwork, create a measurable plan, something you're comfortable with. We could even seek funding together." Robert's eyebrows shot up, a mixture of surprise and intrigue crossing his features. Max felt the warmth of adrenaline pumping through him, recognizing the moment as one that could shift everything, not just for Maria, but for himself as well. "Max, she needs your support. Not just as a sounding board, but as a partner," Maria added, her eyes pleading with both conviction and gratitude. Emboldened by her encouragement, he found a new resolve swelling within. The adaptation of their divergent paths was no longer a question. It was an imperative. His father didn't need a defense. He needed to see the symbiosis that Max envisioned. As he felt the potential for a collaboration that transcended their previous barriers, Max locked eyes with Robert, a new weight settling over the room. Yet even as hope surged, a lingering question persisted at the edges of Max's mind. Would it be enough to challenge Robert's skepticism and open his heart to a partnership forged in the fires of mutual belief? And as those unanswered futures loomed around them, still floating in the charged atmosphere of the unspoken, one fact crystallized in Max's mind. The time had come to face the reality beyond the inertia of expectation. Max awoke the next day with an urgency coursing through him. The conversation from the night before replayed in his mind, each word settling like stones in a riverbed, shaping his thoughts and aspirations. What had begun as an argument with Robert now felt like a moment of revelation, a nudge to redirect his life's trajectory. Fueled by a mix of excitement and trepidation, he began to map out his plan on a large whiteboard in his office. Each section of the board became a facet of his vision: Maria's research, potential methodologies, and financial considerations. Doubts crept in, gnawing at the edges of his enthusiasm. Could he, with minimal experience, truly partner with Maria in this endeavor? It was one thing to dream, but another entirely to execute. He leaned back in his chair, wrestling with these fears. As he gazed at the board, something crystallized. This project wasn't merely about Maria's work, nor was it solely an opportunity to prove himself to Robert. It was the first step in carving out his identity, one built on collaboration and integrity. It was about finding where his passion intersected with practicality. The phone buzzed, startling him from his introspection. It was Maria, her voice a comforting mix of urgency and enthusiasm as she laid out her own ideas for the project. "I've compiled a few research papers that might help us ground our hypothesis," she said. "I was thinking we could meet today. I want to flesh out what a presentation might look like." "Absolutely," he replied, his excitement crackling. "Let's brainstorm how we can present this in a way that illustrates the intersection of our ideas and the practicality Robert seeks. As he prepared for their meeting later that afternoon, his focus sharpened. No longer was he preparing to engage in a confrontation. He was readying himself for collaboration. This shift in mindset burdened him with new responsibilities. They were no longer merely ideas flung into the void. They were stakes he firmly held. Maria arrived, her presence a grounding force amid his escalating ideas. They spent hours discussing various angles, from historical breakthroughs grounded in scientific uncertainty to the growing trend of interdisciplinary research. Max found himself at ease within the rhythm of their conversation, savoring the feeling of being heard and validated by someone who valued his contributions. Max, you have a unique perspective that can bridge theoretical concepts with practicality, Maria said, her eyes bright with belief. Those words felt like a balm, a contrasting echo to Robert's skepticism that had haunted him. With newfound confidence, Max began distilling their ideas into a coherent pitch, intertwining Maria's ambitious vision with grounded data metrics. They sketched out potential funding sources, envisioning what success could look like, not just for the grant proposal, but for their partnership. Yet beneath the surface layers of shared enthusiasm lay an uncomfortable truth. What if they succeeded, and Robert remained unconvinced? What would that mean for his relationship with his father? Max knew he was playing a risky game. The possibility of failure loomed as large as the potential for success. As they wrapped up for the night, Max felt the weight of his father's expectations settle once more, mingling with the thrill of pursuing something meaningful. He hadn't merely begun drafting a proposal. He was dancing on the edge of redefining his own narrative. The next steps were far more challenging than their initial discussions. The unfolding reality of the project tested not just their ideas, but the very fabric of his relationship with Robert. And as Max looked out at the city skyline, the possibilities swirled wildly in his head, waiting to be confronted, waiting to be untangled. Questions thrummed at the edges of his mind. What if success brought him closer to Robert, or instead expanded the chasm between them? Would it be enough to elevate not only Maria's dreams, but also his own? Max took a deep breath, steeling himself for what would come next. It was time to face the world unfettered by expectations, a journey caged in both hope and uncertainty. And as he prepared to take those first crucial steps into the unknown, another truth began to dawn. Sometimes the most daunting leap he had to make was toward his own authenticity. The next morning uncoiled like the beginning of a new chapter for Max. Sunlight streamed through his office windows, illuminating both the potential that lay before him and the deeper shadows he was yet to confront. He realized he could not merely glide into this venture. Every element of this project required his full engagement and unwavering determination. Eager to build momentum, he reached out to some colleagues for feedback on their evolving proposal. He hoped he could extract valuable insights, but deep down he braced himself for critiques that could pierce through the protective bubble of optimism he had cultivated with Maria. Their comfort with skepticism had woven a thin veil around him, but he knew any weakness exposed under professional scrutiny could drive him back to that looming doubt. His first meeting was with Julian, a seasoned researcher known for his bluntness. As they began discussing the idea, Max explained how their interdisciplinary approach could revolutionize their understanding of the core subject matter. Julian's brow furrowed as he listened, and Max felt the anticipation of judgment weigh heavily in the air. "While the idea is ambitious, I wonder how you plan to navigate the financial side," Julian mused, his voice steady yet probing. "It's all well and good to dream big, but without a solid plan you risk wasting time and resources, I know," Max interrupted, feeling the flush of defense rise within him. "But that's precisely why Maria and I are preparing that proposal. We're outlining potential funding sources, risk assessments, you name it. We intend to address all the what-ifs. We can't afford to overlook any details." Julian nodded, but Max could see the skepticism etched in his features. With every instinct screaming for him to convince Julian of their vision, Max realized he was arguing not just for Maria, but also for himself, his identity, his worth, and his vision. The pressure mounted, and he found himself choking on questions about whether he could pull this off, whether his claims could stand against seasoned pressure. Later, he called Maria, still brimming with both excitement and anxiety from their earlier discussion. Julian had some tough questions, but I think if we anticipate them during our presentation, we'll surprise them, he suggested. You're right, Maria replied, her voice buzzing with enthusiasm. Every challenge we face can also be a chance to fortify our bond, not just as collaborators, but as friends. We got this. Her words ignited a flicker of hope within him. Max realized that their connection was built on more than just professional obligation. They championed each other's ideas, dreams, and increasingly, insecurities. Yet with that friendship came the fear of letting each other down. The day wore on, and as Max returned to his office, he noticed the paper on his desk, the one with Robert's signature on countless projects. The expectations he'd never confronted. The weight of validation piled high, as he had always imagined his father's pride would be the ultimate payoff, not this newfound purpose he was beginning to forge. That very evening, Max decided it was time to confront that legacy head-on. He texted Robert, asking for a meeting. The anticipation churned in his stomach as he pressed send, realizing this wouldn't be about collaborations or proposals, but rather an examination of their relationship, the testing ground for everything he had built through Maria's partnership. This was the pivotal moment that could either breach the divide between them or deepen it. Max spent a restless night preparing for their conversation, poring over notes and rehearsing different routes the dialogue might take. If he could articulate his vision convincingly, perhaps he could redefine not only the project, but also his bond with Robert. The moment had arrived, the weight of both hope and trepidation pressed down upon him. With every step toward his father's office, he felt the anticipation transform into a burning resolve, even as the familiar specters of doubt lurked in the corners of his mind. Would Robert accept the man Max was becoming, or would he resist the change, holding on to the traditional ideals that had guided their relationship for years? As he approached the door, he paused, feeling the weight of the moment. It was time to face not only his father, but his own fear of rejection. With a steadying breath, he knocked, ready to confront the very essence of what it means to step courageously into his future. The door creaked open, revealing Robert seated behind a polished mahogany desk. The office was a testament to his success. Framed certificates lined the walls, reminders of accolades accumulated over decades. It all felt imposing to Max, a fortress built on trust that he struggled to breach. "Max," Robert greeted, lifting his head with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. "Come in." "Thanks for meeting with me," Max said, his voice slightly shaky, betraying the adrenaline that coursed through him. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him like a veil dropping between their past and an uncertain future. Robert motioned him to sit, his fingers steepled, a familiar pose that unconsciously signaled authority. "What's on your mind?" Max swallowed hard, the words swirling in his mind like a tempest, each vying for his attention. "I wanted to talk about the new project Maria and I are working on. I really believe it has potential, and I'd like to get your thoughts." As he spoke, the gravity of his words weighed heavily between them. Each phrase felt like casting a stone into the depths of a still pond. A ripple of apprehension coursed through him. Would Robert perceive this as a challenge to his authority or a sign of Max's growth? "I'm glad you're working with Maria," Robert said after a beat, his tone unreadable. "She has a promising track record, but I hope you're not relying too heavily on her. This is your responsibility now." The subtle jab pricked at Max's uncertainty. Was he indeed hiding behind Maria? But he had collaborated with her because he respected her input, not as a crutch. "I understand, But I want to bring fresh perspectives to the table, Max asserted, steadying himself with renewed conviction. We've mapped out the financial implications, incorporated risk assessments. We're aiming to minimize vulnerabilities. Robert raised an eyebrow, his keen gaze dissecting Max's intentions. And what makes you think that this approach will succeed where others have failed? Remember, the stakes are high. The question pierced through Max's carefully constructed defenses. Because I know I can't approach this the same way I have before. I need to be more innovative, more critical of the status quo. I need to leverage what I've learned and who I have around me, including Maria. As silence enveloped the room, Max felt the weight of his words hang in the air. Each heartbeat marked the tension of disclosure, the risk of vulnerability laid bare. Would Robert recognize the growth he had fought for, or would he dismiss it as youthful bravado? Growing up, I often felt like you wanted me to mirror your ambitions, Max continued, breaking the silence that had settled like a fog. But I'm not you. I'm forging my own path, one that involves collaboration and creativity. Robert's expression shifted, but Max wasn't sure if it was a flicker of understanding or irritation. I worry your path will lead to mistakes. Mistakes can be costly. I'd rather make mistakes following my vision than play it safe with someone else's, Max replied. His voice resonated with a newfound strength. This was no longer just about the project. It was about redefining himself in Robert's eyes. As the conversation shifted, Max asked pointed questions, testing Robert's limits, pushing back on the traditional norms that had structured their relationship for so long. With each exchange, he felt the barriers begin to tremble under the weight of his challenges. By the end of their meeting, they had dissected budget constraints and explored fresh avenues for innovation. Yet, beneath the surface of their dialogue lay an emotional undercurrent. Max recognized that he wasn't just redefining professional boundaries. He was courageously attempting to reshape their bond. As Max prepared to leave, he took a moment to soak it all in, the confidence that buzzed through his veins, the subtle adjustments in Robert's demeanor. Perhaps there was an opening, a chance to redefine who they were to each other. But as he stepped out of the office, an unsettling thought loomed large. Was he truly ready to embrace the metamorphosis, or would he falter against the tide of expectations? The door closed behind him, echoing in his mind, a reminder that while he had taken a bold step forward, the journey ahead was fraught with trials. The ground beneath felt tenuous. It was only just the beginning. Max glanced at his phone, the screen illuminated with a message from Maria. Ready to tackle those challenges together? He hesitated, half tempted to dive into the next chapter, but a gnawing uncertainty lingered. How would their partnership evolve amidst his tumultuous transformation? A new crossroads awaited, one that tested not just their collaboration, but the very foundation of their friendship. Max stood at the precipice of a new dawn, the sun breaking through the clouds as he stared out from his office window. The weight of his recent encounters with Robert lingered in his mind, both exhilarating and daunting. Yet the storm that had loomed over his relationship with his father was beginning to recede, replaced by an undercurrent of hope. The culmination of a series of pivotal discussions with Robert had forced him to confront not only his ambitions, but the expectations that had sought to contain him for far too long. Days had passed since their meeting, and Max had thrown himself into the project with Maria. They worked tirelessly, crafting a proposal that melded Maria's groundbreaking ideas with sharp, strategic proposals illustrating their potential for funding and impact. This was more than just a project. It was a manifestation of their dreams, and for Max, a testament to the power of collaboration over competition. As they prepared for the presentation before Robert and the board of directors, anxiety swirled within him. Yet this wasn't the paralyzing fear he once felt. It was a fueled energy propelling him toward a future he had envisioned. He had faced Robert before, but now Max contained a resilience fortified through all the moments he had dared to challenge the status quo. On the day of their presentation, the atmosphere in the boardroom was thick with anticipation. The board members filed in, their faces encapsulating a range of expressions: curiosity, skepticism, and even intrigue. As Robert took his place at the end of the long table, Max felt a surge of determination. This was his arena, a chance to showcase not just Maria's brilliance, but his own growth, a synthesis of their ideas bridged through mutual respect and partnership. "Good afternoon, everyone," Max began, his voice steady as he looked out across the room. He could feel the pulse of uncertainty in his veins, but harnessed it as fuel. "Today, Maria and I are excited to share our research proposal focused on dark matter and the interconnectedness of various astronomical phenomena." As he proceeded, articulating their vision with clarity and confidence, Max observed the subtle shifts in Robert's demeanor. The familiar lines of skepticism remained etched on Robert's face, yet something new flickered in his eyes. An openness, perhaps. Max seized this moment, emphasizing the collaborative process that had driven their project. Science thrives on inquiry and the synthesis of diverse perspectives. Maria's unique insights have allowed us to reframe traditional methodologies, transforming not only our approach to a formidable subject, but also illustrating new pathways for exploration, he concluded, the weight of every word striking the air with significance. When it was Maria's turn to present, she captivated the room, effortlessly weaving her passion for astronomy with concrete data. Max could see their peers leaning in, engaged by the way she articulated ideas that had once lived only in the confines of whispered conversations between them. As she dug into how their research could lead to a fundamental understanding of the universe, the glimmer of possibility stitched itself into the fabric of the room. When they finished, a silence enveloped the room. Max's heart raced, uncertainty gnawing at him. Had they made an impact, or had they merely expected too much? Robert broke the silence. "You've both presented a compelling vision, but vision alone isn't enough." He paused, allowing the tension to thicken. "However," he added, a flicker of something meaningful in his tone, "I appreciate how you've approached this. Collaboration is key, and it's what you've demonstrated." Max clenched his fists, a wave of pride washing over him as Robert's acknowledgement settled into the room. The recognition held more weight than any previous success he'd experienced. As discussions continued, Max felt the shift. Robert no longer stood as an immovable wall. Instead, he began to engage in dialogue that transcended their traditional dynamic. Max realized this was more than just a breakthrough for the project, it was for their relationship too. For the first time in a while, father and son were not adversaries, but allies. In the weeks that followed, as their proposal gained traction, Max observed a transformation within himself. No longer shackled by the weight of expectations, he reveled in the joy of creativity and innovation. He began to replace anxiety with a confidence rooted in authenticity. They garnered interest from potential investors, sparking hopeful conversations, and with each step forward, the bond with Maria deepened. They were not just colleagues, but friends navigating a bright future. The most significant change came when Robert invited Max to join him in discussions about potential adaptations to the company's strategies, moving beyond pure profits towards innovative investments in education, mentoring young talents in fields of science and technology. In these conversations, Max felt his voice increasingly validated, his insights acknowledged. As the sun set over the horizon one evening, Max sat in the lab, reviewing the expansive work they had built together. Maria joined him, the warmth of camaraderie wrapping around them. "Together, we've created something meaningful," she smiled. And Max knew in his heart that this wasn't just about the project they built. It was about how he had stepped into his identity, fulfilling the deeper aspirations he had once shied away from. In this newfound state, he had confronted his fears, embraced his passion, and forged connections that defied expectations. Max had emerged not just as his father's son, but as an individual ready to not only chase the stars, but reach across the vastness of potential to create pathways that bridged ambition with authenticity. Max stood taller than ever. He felt fulfilled, not merely as the prized son trying to live up to Robert's legacy, but as a passionate innovator paving his unique journey. What lay ahead was still uncertain, but as he looked out over the night sky sprinkled with stars, he understood. True success had never been about the accumulation of wealth, but the richness of relationships built on trust, respect, and shared dreams. Finally ready to embrace his path, Max smiled at the limitless possibilities waiting just beyond the horizon. Now it's time for you to take action. You need to subscribe now to never miss these transformative stories that will inspire you. Hit that like button immediately to feed the algorithm and help spread these narratives of personal triumph. Comment below with your thoughts about Max's journey and what it means to pursue dreams against all odds. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Make sure they too can be inspired by these powerful tales of overcoming.